Athlete Builder. Really lucky to bring on Tony Holler today. We have Coach. He's come from a coaching family, parents, himself, his kids, and talk about making a dent in the world of coaching and getting people better with impact. Hall of Fame coach, and doesn't start and stop there. But when I talk about impact, I talk about hundreds of schools and therefore thousands of student athletes. We're talking about people not just on North America continent, but also in Europe and soon to be in Brazil and South America. So Tony Holler, when I thought about, hey, he's a track coach, but that's not right. He's a speed coach, and that's my dog. Being he's pretty excited about that too. So a speed coach, not just a track coach. And what's that mean? That whatever sport you're in, speed is usually not chess and checkers, but usually really, really important. And that's one of the, if you think about Tony, you talk to Tony, that's his deal, right? It's about building speed, and he has his methodologies, and he's been a proven commodity in the athletic world. So we got Tony Holler on today. We're going to get into it, and it's an area that arguably of strength and conditioning, probably one of my weaker areas. So I'm really looking forward to learning a bunch today, posing a bunch of questions, and pitting Tony and Lucas against each other a little bit, and just seeing where we'll go. But man, Coach Tony, man, thanks for being on today.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks.
You're welcome. Just lucky that had you on. One of our other coaches, I was telling Lucas, Chad Dockery's a good friend of ours, been on the show. He's a athletic director down at Wrights Memorial in Evansville. He was helping out my kid when he was in Plainfield High School in Indiana, and Tony's from Plainfield, Illinois. He coached my kid in track and football, and a couple years ago, Plainfield here won their state title. Coach Pelkey's the main guy there. And I was talking to Chad this weekend. He's like, we use Tony's Feed the Cats philosophies almost to a T, and they won it 2 years ago, and they were 6 points away from repeating. So he came on with a ringing endorsement, because I had some questions with him before I do some research today. So one of our prior guests, and Lucas knows him well, but you're well known in a lot of places. So my first question was, I see I wouldn't say a good Catholic, but I'm a Catholic, and we have the 10 Commandments, and I saw Tony has his commandments on running. And one of the things he writes down is that people are good at what they like and obsessed at what they love. Well, no one comes out of the womb obsessed with speed. Usually things evolve over time. So talk about how you and your upbringing with your dad, and how did it go from A to B, that you went from I really like speed to I love speed to now I'm obsessed with speed. How did that evolve? Because coaching for 40 plus years, you're not the same coach you were 5 years ago or 40 years ago.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's important to understand that not only was my dad a coach, but there was something about coaches in the Midwest, basketball coaches in the Midwest, whether it was Indiana or in Illinois, especially those two states, where truly the head basketball coach was possibly the most recognizable person in the community. You think
Yes.
back to Norman Dale and Hoosiers,
Oh, yeah.
that was a big deal, and so coaching was not a hobby for my dad. He was a head basketball coach at 22. I was born when he was 23, so I was his firstborn son, and became his wingman right away. And I believe he coached at 7 different high schools and 1 university, and was a head coach 44 of his 47 years. So it was one of those things where anywhere I would go with him, people would come up, and I just thought he was like maybe the most famous person in the world, as a little kid. And so coaching was bigger than life, sports bigger than life. He woke up every day excited about the next practice, the next game, the next season. The eighth grader that was 6'2" and could grab the rim, and he was always excited. So I was just doomed to be a coach myself. I went to college pre-med, and I decided I didn't like hospitals, blood, sickness, nurses. I didn't like any of that stuff. And I was like, hell, I'm going to be a coach. So now I've done it for 44 years. And I went into basketball. I was a head basketball coach all through the 80s. I was the youngest head basketball coach at one time in the state of Illinois. And but I got fired in 1990 that's the kind of stuff that happens in Illinois and Indiana basketball, where
It
have a
does.
couple of losing seasons or a couple 500 seasons, and they say we want somebody else. And so the same board that fired me actually hired me, begged me to become the head track coach because they couldn't find anybody. And I'd always had, I'd always run track. I was always an assistant track coach, all that kind of stuff. But that was a hobby. It was never a serious thing for me, but I had to reinvent myself. I had
Mhm.
4 little kids, had to reinvent myself as a track coach. And eventually, the first 10 years, I coached the way the coaches I now make fun of coached, just run my guys to death. They all had shin splints. They all hated practice. Um, and we would brag about how we worked harder than anybody in the country and blah, blah, blah. And, and eventually I flipped the switch and said, we're not going to run anymore. We're just going to sprint. And the reason for that was to get football players to want to run track, to get the guy who could dunk a basketball to want to run track. And I said, even if I train them poorly, we're going to kick some ass when it comes to track meets, because other schools can't get their good athletes out because they're doing the same stupid stuff I'm doing. And it worked. And what I found out was as we got faster, we got better in everything. So one of my things I say is the speed is the tide that lifts all boats. And so I became kind of obsessed with the idea of let's get really fast. And now, as you said, it's really grown into lacrosse and football and basketball and overseas and all that kind of stuff. But I want to come back to the reason why that statement is in my commandments. I see it. I was a chemistry teacher for 38 years. And I used to tell my chemistry class, this is going to be your favorite class, and I'm going to be your favorite teacher. As far as I know, that was not said by most teachers. It
Sure.
was more like, I'm going to be your worst nightmare, was kind of my experience with teachers. And and what I found was that when kids leaned in and say, maybe I'm going to like this, they liked it.
Yeah.
And they got good at things they liked. And all of a sudden they weren't scared of chemistry. So I believe a true hack of coaches and teachers is to make what they're selling more likable.
That's huge, huge. Enjoyment is one of the core values that we have, and it was probably for the longest time my least favorite of my six. I'm like, well, yeah, you have to kind of like it a little bit, but whatever, just keep working. But I'm like, the more I talk to people, the ones that are really great, they love it so much that the work doesn't feel painful. It's not a stressor on the nervous system. So when you talk about, we had Jeff Saturday on and how he was working with Peyton Manning Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night during game week, late into the night. They weren't bitching and moaning because they were just having a good time because they loved it. So if you have that piece and people are really loving it, and you ask them to learn something more or try something new, they're like, cool, let's go. Was there an epiphany? Was there a alcoholic moment where you had to switch from the grind to, hey, I want to make it more fun and just sprint? Was there something that's a triggering event, or was it like a slow process?
4 things. That's a great question. And I actually call it my epiphany. Um, and and 4 things happened in a period of like 6 months. I'd already won the state championship. I could have rested on those laurels and like, yeah, I'm a good coach. I don't need to change and all this stuff. But the first thing that happened was I had a middle distance centric group with my track team one year. We were by far the best team in the state, and we went to the state meet, and it was 95 degrees, and we had to do it 2 days in a row, and we melted. We did not perform well, and a team of sprinters and jumpers beat us. A team from inner Chicago Leo, beat us. And thought to myself on the way home, it would be so much easier to have a team of sprinters and jumpers. So that was the first thing. The second thing was my son, my oldest son, who's now a very good football and track coach, Alec. Um, he could dunk the ball in the 8th grade. And he told me one day, I'm going to play baseball in high school, Dad, because track sucks. And I'm like, you're living with a coaching legend of track and field, and you're not going to be on my team? He goes, no, it sucks. I go, I know it sucks, but it's. I thought, okay, we're
Okay.
not going to run anymore. That was the second thing. The third thing, I went to a clinic, saw a guy named Paul Souza, who said that his 4x4 had four guys at the college level, Division III, who ran in the 46s. And not one time did they ever run a lap in practice. Not one time.
Not one lap.
Their furthest work in practice was a fast 200, and only like three of them. And I'm like, that's the team I wish I would have been on, because I was a
Hmm.
400 guy in college and all that kind of stuff. I wish I would have had a speed based coach. The fourth thing, maybe you remember a guy named Don Beebe. Don Beebe was a
Buffalo Bills and the
white guy,
Packers.
Buffalo Bills.
Yep.
It ran like the fastest 40 in the history of the combine.
He's my uncle.
He had Don Beebe.
No, I'm kidding.
Don Beebe played for my dad
Okay.
in basketball after he quit football at Western Illinois University. So for 1 year, he was never going to be a football player again. And Dad used to tell me, "Oh, this guy's so fast," and all that. So anyway, he ends up with the Bills. After he gets out, he starts a speed business. And at the same time these other things were working, he called me and said, "Hey, I want to come down and do a speed camp at Harrisburg, Illinois." And I said, "Oh my God, this is Don Beebe. Are you punking me? No way." And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, man, well, let's do it." He goes, 10,000.
Ooh.
I go, 10,000? He goes, "Yeah, just get the banks to sponsor us." I go, "The banks are poor in my town. Okay. You don't understand. Harrisburg, Illinois is a coal mining town, real close to Evansville.
Yeah.
And it's like Appalachia. It's like, it's been in decline for 60 years. And so he even called the next day and said, "I'll do it for 5,000." I said, "That's still too much." So I started my first speed camp 6 weeks later and charged people $20. If Don Beebe can teach speed, why can't I? I don't have to run a 4.29 in the 40
Right.
to be able to coach speed. So
Sure.
from that moment on, I decided I was going to be a speed coach, and it's worked out pretty well.
Yes. Yes, it has worked out well. So, man, the 4 point epiphany, and I like that because a lot of people that are good at things, they have a bunch of other instances or years accumulating data and volume in their head, and it finally comes together. They say that, it takes 10,000 hours, etc. Well, you've had probably close to that before you were really even coaching that much track. So just on how to coach or deal with people. Then you had all the hours of coaching track on top of that and speed. So you put all that together and you're like, well, shoot, maybe this works, maybe that doesn't work, and I can start tinkering with things or just overhauling things. And so I get that. Having been a financial guy for 15 years, and now I'm not, right? So last 12 years I've been running the gym, and now this. The There's still the evolution though, right? You didn't quite have you had those four key pillars that kind of changed your mind, but you probably still weren't the same coach 5 years later or 10 years later. Can you give us a couple of things that, hey, even over the next 10, 20 years, I made some other adjustments as well. Here's what they were, and here are the results.
Well, I think it's important to remind people that I was 40 in 1999. I was 40. Most people are the person they're going to be when they're 25, and they spend the rest of their damn life defending their
Hmm.
identity.
Yes,
And
that's
whereas
it.
whereas my dad, he survived as a coach because of evolution, because he evolved into becoming a better coach, a more of a player centered coach. So he gave me license to evolve. And I think that's really important, because if you're just around hard nosed people who defend the way it's always been done, that's probably who you're going to be too. But I changed everything at the age of 40. Now, the changes I made, the things that happened, like we won the 4x1 in the state, the speed event 3 years in a row after I switched. So I kind of knew I was on to something, like
Yep.
I just kind of fell into a crazy, like people say, "How do you have the courage to do this?" And I was like, nobody gives a shit about track and field. It's a step child at every school, and so there was nobody in the stands. I basically coach orphans because the parents don't even want to come to the meet. So so I was given license to do crazy cool experimental stuff. Maybe that's the sciencey part of me.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first 10 years of it was just me being the mad scientist. But in the last 10 years, from around 2015 on, I started writing, I think in 2013, and that really promoted my thoughts and ideas. And with social media, we have free reach where I can put something I write on social media, and literally something I wrote in 2014 had 2 million shares. 2 million shares. It was an article for Simply Faster called 10 Reasons to Join the Track Team. And so I kind of burst onto the scene as this nobody who wrote about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, I've gotten to be really good friends with the greatest sprint gurus in the world. Les Spellman, I work with Les. Chris Corfist is my business partner. Brian Kula, who trains McCaffrey, is one of my best friends in the world. Cal Dietz, the famous S&C guy at the University of Minnesota, is in my inner circle. I mean, I have a podcast scheduled in 3 days with John Shaw, the Titans speed development guy, Tennessee Titans, and so Dr. Ken Clark is a really good friend of mine. So I mean, like, all of a sudden, I was like rubbing shoulders with the movers and shakers, and these people are all smarter than I am, and they all are willing to share. And so it's been I've learned more in the last 10 years than I learned in my first 56. And I think that's an important statement that
Yep.
at the age of 56, you can still learn tons of stuff. And I think that I've been more enthusiastic in the last 10 years. The more you learn, the more you love it.
Yep. It's also because I can say it's absolutely true for me in that I've been running my gym 12 years, but it's the last two or three as I started putting my philosophies together on paper, in print, where it really kind of started to crystallize, hey, what do I really think and believe, and what have I been testing? And you start seeing that it's part of your identity out there on paper and it's working. Now you see, hey, my ideas or who I am is actually working with other people, and then you're like, man, that's fun because now it's legacy, it's impact, it's what we're called to do, and then you end up start seeing it. I was just asking Lucas beforehand. I said, in the strength and conditioning world, and also just the coaching world, tons of strong ego, my way or the highway. And I love the West Side Barbell guys over in Columbus, Ohio about lifting. But Louis Simmons, the founder there, when he would go to meets and he had his conjugate method, he was always asking other guys that didn't train conjugate, hey, what are you doing? Because he's always trying to adapt and evolve and learn. But still, when I talk to other strength coaches, they might be conjugate coaches and say, hey, this is the way to do it. Or velocity-based training is the way to do it. I just heard from this one college coach, and he simply said, don't you think eventually there's only be just one way? I'm like, well, even that one way continues to evolve. Like there's still the learning. So when you take your philosophies and you go up against, let's say, what's it called? It's the fourth quarter mindset. Have you heard of that?
Sure.
Tons of volume, right?
Yep.
Tons of volume, right? And they're all like, let's go and keep push and push and push. And you're saying minimal volume, high intensity, high intensity. You're not saying no, you're not saying low intensity, very high intensity, low volume. And you got someone saying fourth quarter, and you're like, well, shit, is there no middle ground? How do you work with those mindsets and make an impact? And how do you go against someone who says, you're full of shit, Tony, he needs way more volume? They're not going to be able to handle it. How do you
Yeah,
handle
I get that with track coaches with the 400 meters,
Sure.
because you can't that feed the cats is just for short sprinters. I'm like, no, we ran the fastest 4x4 time in Illinois from the past 7 years last year at sectionals. So yeah, we're good at the 4x4. It's a
Yeah.
speed event. And then from football coaches, football is just such a militaristic. Um, they do hard things that may not even help them win just because it's hard and
Hmm.
just because it gets that mindset. And it's always been a part of football. Lombardi, who I totally agreed with, said that fatigue makes cowards of us all.
Yep.
And it does. I mean, you know, you might be, Jim, you might be like the strongest, baddest, meanest guy in the world. But if you're really
I wish.
tired, I got a chance.
You
I got a
do.
chance to whip you, you know?
That's right.
So, so I think people agreed with that. But what did they do because they agreed with it? What I believe is that tired is the enemy, not the goal. What they believed is that we are going to work so hard every day that we're going to get in a kind of a constant state of fatigue all week long, and it's going to pay off in the fourth quarter of the football game.
Nope.
And I'm like, I think that's crazy as hell. They go, well, it's been done for like what last 100 years. I'm like, well, people have been wrong for 100 years before too.
That's right.
So what I teach is that is going back to my dad. My dad used to say, we're going to make practice so damn hard that the games are easy.
I've heard that for years.
And everybody was like, yeah, that made sense to all of us. That's why we work hard. He did a great job of selling that. What I say is the opposite. We're going to let the games be hard. We are going to be the fastest, most healthy, most enthusiastically lovers of our sport that we could possibly be. That we are going to perform in practice. And to perform in practice, we can't be in a constant state of fatigue. And we are going to enter that Friday the best version of ourselves, 100% health, nobody on the sideline injured. By the way, 90% of all injuries are load-based. We have learned that with GPS, that 90% of injuries happen. It could be a sprained ankle or a concussion. If you are really tired, your body does not have the energy to protect itself.
Yeah.
And so your knee turns the wrong way, or
Your reaction time.
everything. So 90% of injuries are the result of fatigue. So we're like anti-fatigue, you know, that tired is the enemy. And I think the perfect metaphor here is this. People who feed the cats in track and field do a great job in the 400 of teaching their athletes that the last 100 meters, kind of like the fourth quarter of a football game, is going to hurt. You're going to be tired. It's going to hurt, and you're going to sprint through that hurt. Now, it sure helps if you're in the lead. Same in football. If you're up by 3 touchdowns and you're tired in the fourth quarter, who cares? I mean, you're excited. Well, I think that's really important. And then the other thing I say is this. There's nothing I could do during the week that the 400 meters would feel easy. Nothing. I could run you 1,000 miles during the week, and you'd probably be hurt. But if you didn't get hurt, the end of the 400 still hurts.
Still hurts.
I mean, we have 2 4:15 milers on my team. If they run the 4x4, they are going to hurt. It's just going to destroy them late in the race. There's nothing we can do now the good ones make it look easy.
Right.
But if you ask them, did that hurt? They'll say, hell yes.
Every time.
Every time.
Yeah. No one likes the 400 and how it feels.
So you're not, so it's, you're going to like, you're not going to be fatigued throughout the week, but you're going to hurt at the end of the day is kind of what you're saying. You're going to leave it all out there. And I think that's what, especially, being in high school, being where I'm at in high school, the more work is better. More work is always preached. Like I got kids when they come in the weight room, or we do when we're in the summers, we're doing agility and sprint stuff. They look at me sometimes because they're not hurting so bad. They're not gassed. They're not limping out of the weight room or whatever it is, and they think they're not getting any work done. Educating them and understanding that, well, let's just talk about the weight room for a second and say, hey, because you're not smoked today and you got good work in, you're going to be able to train tomorrow and get good work in. And then the same thing is going to happen day after day, week after week. But it's not like I tell them, hey, we're going to go. There's going to be times throughout the year where squats are going to feel heavy. Things are going to feel hard. When we run, it's going to suck. But you're not going to ever feel like you can't come back and train the next day. And I see it all the time, especially, where I'm at and what being in the high school realm. Um, and no, I completely agree with that. So,
Lucas, I think you'd agree with this. Even the most the people I make fun of that just run their teams into the ground, they all know that after a game you take the day off.
you think.
But they think that they can do 3 hour practices on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday with no day off
Hmm.
without any side effects. I mean, it's just not true. It's just not true. And the football programs, and there's hundreds of programs, especially in Texas. And Texas is a hard-nosed football state. That are now feeding the cats. We sometimes call it sprint-based football, um, and and what they've found just kind of blows them away. That you can practice half as long and be twice as good, and because that's not the way we were brought up, right?
Yeah.
We were brought up the winning team outworked the losing team. The great player is a great player because he worked twice as long as the bad player, and that stuff is a bunch of crap. That's just a mythology. That's now, somebody's told me you shouldn't talk bad about hard work. Tell people that you're redefining hard work, because it's not easy to come to practice every day and perform. It's not easy getting 9 hours of sleep the night before.
That's it. That's the deal. So when we talk about what we say here at Athlete Builder, it's not just the training. It's working on your mindset, your knowledge of how to run, working on getting your teammates better so they can drag you along when you're not there. Then it's your nutrition, your recovery. Are you working on those things? You can work a little harder to get better in those areas where you're lacking and put out a better product, which is yourself. That's a huge thing. Everybody thinks that if I just play 5 hours of AAU basketball on Saturday, or if I'm in travel baseball and soccer all week long doing tons of volume, but you're the other 5 out of the 6 components, you're completely negligent, you're going to be okay. That's not true.
Nope.
And the other piece is the intensity is there. The intensity, one of the equations we have is that intensity equals results. And you think about that, like in the lifting standpoint, the Bulgarians were great at intensity. Max effort lifts 3 times a day. They won everything. They were retired and broken by 24, 25 years old. So if you want adaptation on your body, you have to be a little bit more intense than you were the last time. You have to go a little faster than last time, right? And the only way you can do that is if you're clicking on everything else. So if you're always fatigued, you're never going to be able to run as fast as possible. So the intensity is never there. So you're not going to get faster. Same thing with lifting. Like if I want to lift heavier and I'm always exhausted, then I'm wrecked. And then from a personal example, from being a lifter, you wouldn't know this, Tony, but I'm doing this endurance thing in August for charity, and it's a long swim and a bunch of other stuff with the military. And so last week was a longer week for me in terms of volume. And by the end of the week, Friday, I was wrecked. And I'm talking to my wife who's handling my food. And I'm like, well, I missed. We had 2 nights of storms here, so my dog was up, which means I was up. And then I didn't get nearly enough food. So come Friday, I go to do this workout behind on food and behind on sleep. And I am wrecked from a basic recovery workout. I come home, like I needed to sleep at 9:30 in the morning. And I'm like, oh man, that's just textbook, not recovered, still grinding. I would have been better if I skipped the entire workout totally, fed and
Yes.
rested myself, and then moved it to Saturday, or just skipped it altogether and then started again on Monday. Monday's always my longer swims. They're always better. I'm better rested and I'm better fed throughout the weekend, so Monday's better. So to your point, if you come in rested and fed, you got a shot of being more intense and therefore faster.
I have a triangle, not triangle, pyramid. Like everybody has a pyramid or something. The base of my pyramid is rest, recovery, sleep, nutrition, hydration. I believe that you could say whether you are a track athlete, a coach, a parent, a teacher, a hedge fund manager, doesn't matter who you are. If that's not the base of your pyramid, you aren't giving yourself a great shot to get to the next level. So my next level is athleticism: sprint, jump, lift, bounce. Then we get into sport specific stuff. And that's why I've been able to, go to France and work with the federation, the soccer federation there. That's why I've consulted with all these lacrosse teams. That I don't watch soccer, I don't watch lacrosse, I don't play it. But those first two levels of my pyramid is those things are exactly what they're missing. I'm not going in there teaching them how to coach lacrosse or football or basketball. You coach it the way you want to, but you better have those first two layers correct. And then you better adopt the idea that 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 you never should let today ruin tomorrow. And I think that's what, Lucas, you were talking about. That when you let today ruin tomorrow, you're not giving yourself. I'm sure you guys have read Atomic Habits by James Clear. Just a beautiful book. That getting 1% better every day,
Kaizen.
1% better, you're 37 times better at the end of the year.
Yeah.
If you're 1% worse every day, you're 0.03% the man you were when you started. So that 1% is what we should be chasing. I tell people that when I used to be young and full of piss and vinegar, I'd go to the casino and play craps with $100 that I probably shouldn't have had. And I would try to turn 100 into 1,000.
Ooh.
And you always lose. You will
Over
be
time.
out of money in 15 minutes every single time, and you'll hate yourself. But I think that's what a lot of coaches do. They try to turn 100 into 1,000 every day, and it just doesn't work very well.
No, it's the guy that comes in for the 6-week challenge at January 1st to lose a whole bunch of weight. My brother, it's a lifestyle. In terms of Atomic Habits, that was episode 8 for us, where we just went through every chapter and applied it to what we do.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's, we're talking about rest and recover. It's just, this is just kind of a most recent. I got a text message from one of our athletes, and a super hardworking kid. He hurt his knee in basketball season, rehabbed it. He blew out his knee and played in the last couple games. So he's that kind of a hardworking kid. He texts me. We just got off the spring break. He texted me right before spring break, and he's, Coach, what should I need to be doing for my workouts, and what do I need to be doing, to stay? And I was like, so what are you doing for spring break? And he's down in Florida. I'm like, just go down there and have fun, man. Just go be on vacation, go have fun, relax, hang out. Do what you're going to do on spring break. Don't worry about training. Don't even think about it. Don't even think about working out. Don't even really allow this time, because it seems to me that kids don't know how to detach from sport or their training for their sport or their tournaments, their 7-on-7s and all this. They don't know how to detach from it at all. And he comes up to me today. He's like, thank you for telling me not to do anything, because I was overthinking everything. I'm like, yeah, dude, you don't need to just go on vacation, have fun, enjoy it. You feel good now? He's like, yeah, I feel great. I feel ready to get back into it. I was like, well, that's the point. That is the whole point. You're recovered. You feel better. You have the itch to get back to training.
And you weren't telling him that just so that he had fun. You're actually thinking about him as an athlete coming back. And we just got done with our spring break. I did not see my sprinters for 9 days. And as a coach, I can talk all this stuff, but it bothers me. It's like, oh, geez, my 38-foot or 48-foot triple jumpers in Cancun, my 23-foot long jumpers in Coral Gables, Florida. Like, oh my God, are they going to be okay? But then I remember that every year, by giving them those 9 days off, they come back literally faster.
Oh yeah.
Which blows your mind, because they have re-centered themselves, or their CNS is ready to get with it again. And they haven't lost all their conditioning. And whatever they lost, they get it back really quick. But mentally, I think they're so much better prepared for the last 8 weeks of our season because they took that 9 days off.
Absolutely. Jim, I don't know if you have things you want to talk about. I had a couple questions for you, Tony, if you don't mind. where you're at, what like do you deal with a lot of um, AAU and tournaments, and how do you navigate those things for your track team or your athletes? Because I
Main,
have a lot of that.
yeah, mainly several assassinations. I just have I put a hitman out on them and have them shot. No, it's really awful because I really believe the things you're talking about. They they're really good at talking to parents, and they're really good at promotion, which means that I, as a coach, need to be better with parents and better with promotion. But I think the difference between me and them is I'm an educator, and and no matter what my kids do, I don't make more money. You know, I'm going to make my $6,500 for coaching track, whether we're state champs or last in our conference. So, but these guys, they they have a financial um, uh,
Motive.
motive.
Yeah.
You know, and they don't care if a guy has a track meet tomorrow. They'll still they'll still have him come in for a basketball tournament. They yes, it hurts me because 7 on 7. If you want to be a great NFL football player, you better have pretty good track numbers. Um,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
67% of NFL football players ran track in high school. And and guess what? They're really good because they're like future professional athletes. And but that track stuff gave them numbers that people, let's just say if a guy if you have a guy that's jumping 23 feet in the long jump and he's playing linebacker, he's a 5 star. I mean,
That's
you,
huge.
you don't have to time him in the 40. He is, you know, there was a kid at Ravenswood, Tennessee, just south of Nashville. I know they feed the Raptors down there. A great program. And they had a kid named Star. Great name. But yeah, he was a really good football player. He hit 24 miles an hour a couple times on the field. And he ran 10.50 in the 100 as a junior. And I think high jump 6'10". Well, that means he's going to get like $300,000 as soon as he graduates. We graduated in December, went down to Auburn, and he's going to be a superstar because those numbers don't lie.
Oh,
So I think that we have to do a really good job of selling our programs, and and if we can do that, we can compete with these people that are taking these 7 on 7 teams down to Arizona and down to Florida, and parents just get drunk on that stuff, and they really feel, I think, because we are high school based educators, that we are not going to be great coaches. So we have a lot to prove. And I think that if we spend all of our time complaining about those outside influences, we're not looking enough in the mirror, because I think we just have to outcompete those people, and it's not easy.
yeah. Yeah, you're definitely right. It's you know, we're seeing, at the school I'm at, when I first got here, involved with, Parkview and the high school I'm at, working with Scott, the high school, we had no strength and conditioning. We had nothing. At this point now we have 400 athletes coming through the weight room on a daily basis, which is huge for where we're at. And it's awesome. And we're seeing lots of growth because kids are buying into it. But I think since there was no structure for so long, and the only kind of training or any kind of performance, whatever they were getting, was coming from outside of the school. I think that had a lot of influence on it too. But trying to train athletes on we run the classes, we run after school. Trying to manage, I don't load management. I think it's thrown around a lot. But I mean, it's kind of doing a lot of keeping kids healthy as opposed to actually getting them bigger, faster, more athletic, less injury prone. I feel like I'm doing a lot more load management because I know exactly what they're doing. I know they're doing 7 on 7s, and you know, do you have to run into all that,
Well,
or you have to?
I had an anchor guy on my 4x1 who who I was thrilled that he came out for track because he was a great lacrosse player and he's going to play lacrosse at the college level. He was like a scholarship lacrosse guy. But when he came out for track, I knew he's the fastest guy in the school, and because he'd work out with us in the winters. And so I was really happy to have him. But he said, Coach, I'm track first. I've already got a scholarship, but I'm going to play in a couple tournaments. And I said, well, I need to know when they are and all that kind of stuff. So if he played in a tournament over the weekend, he did not practice on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday because, like you said, we we have to be the smart people. I mean,
Right.
like, they can absolutely burn these kids up and get them hurt and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not going to do that. Yeah, if and I get this stuff all the time. Somebody's playing club soccer or something, and they're also on the track team. What do I do with them? I said, well, don't do too much. I mean, you want them to be healthy and you want them to be available. And I am not the type of coach that believes that every kid needs the exact same dosage of everything. I think out of the box. We have a thing where if somebody has shin splints, they don't run that day.
Right.
So the kid, this is funny. A kid will come up and say, Coach, my shins. I go, okay, you're not running. You go, they're not that bad. They're not that. They'll argue with me. I said, you just told me your shins were hurting. So no, you're not going to do this. I told that, I said that we don't do sore shins at a coaching clinic in Wisconsin. And a coach raised her hand and say, Coach, do you have kids that take advantage of that? I'm like, never. That's culture. If you make practice the best part of a kid's day,
Hmm.
they're not playing games with you, trying to get
Right.
out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
How do you do that? It's hot sometimes, it's cold sometimes, it's shitty outside sometimes, and you got to go run, right? Because they're recovered. So today's the day we're gonna push.
that's
So
a
you know, you know,
brilliant question.
there's a
And
lot to that, but how do you?
great coaches do it without thinking a lot about it.
Okay,
And that's probably, they have good charisma. I do
sure,
believe I teach that your team will reflect you, but remember this, that you will reflect your team too.
sure,
If you're dealing with some like kids that you wish you didn't have on the team, you're not as good of a coach.
sure.
So our job is to get caffeinated before practice and to come out,
With some
like
energy.
a professional, like this is the best part of your day. And and I think the kids will kind of buy into that.
Yeah.
And then there's just all the little things. Like I think we have the best uniforms in the state. I think like we're going down to Belleville for a meet this Saturday. We're going to stay overnight, four to a room at a Super 8, and our kids will think they're on vacation. You know, and but it's all those things that
Sure.
that we have a great website. I take pictures at meets because really, what are you going to do? Run faster, run fast. No, I
Right.
take pictures because I want to promote what we're doing, and my pictures make that track meet look better than it really was.
Sure.
You can't tell that it was windy and cold. All you see is a guy going over the hurdles and looking like he's really good or something. And so I'm doing all those things, and I think they all go together to make a kid want to be there. And I think that coaching track is really good for coaches because track is not inherently a fun sport.
No.
Miserable weather, miserable work.
High
April.
intensity.
Oh, it's scary. And when you get up, I've had football players want to quit because they got second in a race. I go, you got second. He goes, no, I'm quitting. I'm slow. I mean, people freak out. Whereas in basketball, you can do almost anything to a basketball team and nobody will ever quit. Football, about the same way. Like if a kid wants to quit, their parents are like, no, you're not quitting because their parents love football or something. So track being such an orphan sport and everything has made me really learn how to sell it. And because I sell it better than other coaches, I think I I get, let's just say that every school has a good track team. They're just not out for track. If I'm not good at Plainfield North, it's because my gene pool is really down that year because my fast guys want to run.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That goes back to your enjoyment piece. You actually really love what's going on. So yeah,
Yep,
you add some caffeine for some outside stimulus, but you're not really faking the love that you have for these kids to improve 1% today.
for sure.
That's just real. And
This
if it's real and authentic, then people see that and feel it,
and
and
kids,
and then you
kids,
have it.
kids have an amazing BS meter.
They
I
do.
mean, they see fraudulent stuff. They see right through you. And I mean, I love kids. People say, "Oh, kids these days, blah blah blah." The kids I'm around are absolutely inspiring. And maybe that's partly due to the culture of our team. And culture is I love that word. And, what does that mean? Culture is just how we do things and the way we approach things. And it's unwritten rules. And culture is not something you get by establishing rules and consequences. Matter of fact, that will probably ruin culture. We do not have rules and consequences on my team. Instead, my kids act right because they're taught how to act every damn day.
Some people are going to be listening to this show and they're going to be like, all right, I understand what they're trying to say, but I don't understand at all what Feed the Cats, what that philosophy even is. Now, just because Lucas and I do, they're going to be like, what is he even talking about? What is the whole sprinting thing, the philosophy? I don't get it. Just for those that don't know, can you put out there for whether it's track or for a team sport like football, what is that philosophy and how is that significantly different?
Okay, I love that question. I'll go back. I made a reference to Norman Dale from Hoosiers,
Oh, yeah.
and he had a quote in the movie. It says, "My practices are not designed for your enjoyment." And coaches all over America were high fiving and like, God, he tell them, I'm going to remember that. I'm going to tell my team that. Well, I'm the opposite. Feed the Cats is trying to make practice the best part of a kid's day. We are going to become highly athletic. And the number one, if I said define athleticism, the first word out of anybody's mouth is fast. Fast, explosive,
Jumping.
strong. Seldom do they say weak and slow, but they can run all day.
Right.
So we're not. So we get rid of all mindless conditioning. Obviously, we are conditioning for our race, but we don't call it that. I don't use the E word, endurance. I just don't, unless you're an endurance athlete. If you run the mile and 2 mile, yes, you can use the E word. But sprinters, they don't. Enduring slow paces does not improve your ability to go fast or jump high or jump far. So so we gamify practice, which means we measure everything. We record, rank, and publish. We make practice look a lot like a game, and we actually perform in practice. And you say, well, doesn't aren't all teams performing in practice? I have seen teams that the practice doesn't look anything like performance. In track, they're just running 10 400s at like a mile pace. Or in football, they're just slogging through this slow crap because of all this stuff they did. So we're actually going to perform in practice. We are going to rest, recover, sleep in order to be the best version of ourselves every day and to stay healthy. We are going to um, appreciate the fact that kids are really going to be good at what they like. Steve Jobs said that, say, if you really love something you're doing, you don't have to be pushed. And that's what most coaches think they have to do to kids. They have to push them. They have to yell at them and scream at them. Instead, if you really love something, the kid feels pulled. And I want my kids to feel pulled towards success. And by the way, Feed the Cats, one of the reasons why it's such a big deal now is that coaches are reborn. If as a football coach you have a 3 hour practice and you have 3 hour practice the day before, you better say the word effort 2,000 times because that's the only thing a kid can give you if he can't perform. If he's too tired to perform, he's just so you're going to have to scream at him, cuss him. You have to threaten him, and push him, push him, push him, and then after 3 hours of being an SOB, you have to go home and you might kick your dog and yell at your wife or vice versa. It's hard to turn off that I'm an asshole thing. just because you're going home to your family. Well, coaches who feed the cats, first of all, it wins. It wins, which makes you a happier guy. But you don't have to apologize to your family anymore that I'm going to be a mean son of a gun, for the next 4 months. If you talk to me, I may not actually hear what you say because my mind's going a million. You might actually get to sleep at night. You may not actually have to drink as much. All the things that coaches have always done in order to deal with the stress and pain of the stuff. And like I said, I grew up with this. I grew up, I mean, not only was my dad a coach, but my mom's three brothers all played college football, and two of them are Hall of Fame football coaches. So, Thanksgiving was all about coaching. It was about our teams and all that kind of stuff. So that's really what Feed the Cats is. And one last thing, Feed the Cats is not a system. I say it's not a recipe. It's a way to cook. So I am not, if Lucas was a head football coach, I would change nothing about your offense, Lucas, or your defensive scheme. I would change nothing about your ideas on tackling. I would change your ideas about dosage and practice and a high-low system in practice where you're going high one day and you back off the next day, kind of like a pregame, so you can be high the next day. And all those things would be stuff that just basically how you cook. It's not the recipe. So it's not a copy and paste. It's not a plug and play type of program. It is more of just a different mindset about how you coach.
Okay. One of the things that I find that, say your philosophy is diametrically opposed with other philosophies. And one of the things I tell us, like, we run a CrossFit gym and I have this issue with athletes under recovery because you want people, you said higher dosage and lower dosage. And I would say, have you ever deloaded a day or two or a week, once a quarter or leading into a meet? And they say, well, I can't. I'm gonna lose my mental edge. I'm gonna lose my physical edge. I go, how do you know? Maybe how I've been training you. And what if I was the one that said constantly push, push, push? How do you know? You have no data otherwise. Test the other hypothesis. So maybe I test the all grind approach. Maybe I test the feed the cats approach. But now I have some data and I can assess. And I can give them examples after examples that every time I went on vacation and came back and lifted, I lifted heavier. And
Wow.
one of my easiest days to lift always is the day after Thanksgiving. I have tons of food and I have a couple naps and I slept in late. And the next day I'm gonna come in nervous system completely fixed, tons of calories. And I'm like, here are two different examples. One on vacation, came back stronger. One day later, after a bunch of food and resting, I came back stronger. Why not just try a different philosophy for a little bit and see?
That's I love that question because there's a reason why they don't try Feed the Cats.
Ego.
That's part of it, but it's also the grind is beautiful job security. If you go 2-7 as a football coach,
Yep.
but every parent says, I tell you what, nobody worked harder than those guys. He worked there. I mean, my kids were crawling through that front door. He wore them out. That is actually job security. What
I,
people tell me is like, okay, I'm all in on this, but if we start practicing an hour and a half instead of 3 hours, and I give them like a random Thursday off, and we get beat, I'll get fired the next night. And that's kind of the truth because we live in this, we've just been fed forever this Mamba mentality. And I'm telling you, every great coach and every gifted, beautiful professional athlete will all tell you the same thing, how they got there. They won't talk about how tall their parents were or the fact their parents were in the NFL. Instead, they'll say, I outworked everybody. I was up at 4 o'clock. I blah, 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 blah. And it's really sad. I mean, I understand why they do this. But when that's all you hear, nobody says I was great because I took 3 days off every week. Nobody has the guts to say that ever. And because of that, It's just been driven into our brains that that's the only way to do it.
So yeah, I didn't think of that piece at all. I would just say that, hey, I have to simply say that my philosophy wasn't perfect. Therefore, I'm exposed and not perfect. So you can like me a little bit less. A lot of people aren't okay with that. So I always tied it back to that. But there is a component there. Hey, we work so hard. How could you be mad at me? Well, and if you listen to Tony Robbins and all, he'll point out all the time that there's plenty of options where you can run around really hard in a circle and do a ton of work
Yeah,
getting absolutely nowhere. You know, at some point the results still have to matter.
I think so. And when I talk to coaches and say if I told you that you could win 20% more games, but you'd have to take one day off a week from practice, would you do it? A lot of them say there's no way I would ever risk that. Think about it. I
Wow,
mean, like, and as you said, like Thanksgiving made you a good lifter the next day.
for sure.
Lucas talked about, the guy that, like, what should I be doing over vacation? You go like, get out in the sun, enjoy it. Just forget about everything. And it's really that type of attitude. And I do have to, like reassure people. But some people think that I'm like this, this every day is just like this woke party atmosphere or something. And I mean, we were out in the blowing snow today, and all my guys ended up in the fetal position at the end of 3 200s. And they were tough. And I was so proud of them. And I told them I was proud of them. And when I say that I want practice to be fun, it's kind of like a cutthroat fun. It's kind of, and I think you guys understand what I'm talking about. That competitors, uh, win or lose, feel good when they're competing. And so it's not like this birthday party grab ass type of fun that we have in practice. It's more like we love playing games and we love winning and losing and talking trash and stuff.
We had Shane Sweat on. I've been in a number of his lifting seminars. He's a CrossFit conjugate disciple and super super smart guy. And in the conjugate program, I don't know if you're familiar with the lifting and conjugate, but there are max effort days, right, where you're lifting as heavy as possible. And he would say that the culture was on those days because usually they're 2 days a week, but even sometimes they even get rid of those because if you're maxing out even just 2 days a week for just a few lifts, it's still too taxing. But he would say this, hey, on these days or on your accessories, they're trying to set new personal records all the time. So every day's a fight versus yourself and your last time you did that lift, whether it's a small accessory like a hamstring curl or it's a major squat, right? So on these max effort days or attempts, yeah, there's intense. There's like there's a grind. There's a grind because you're trying to get through this rep. It's really really hard. Like that super hard 200. That's a painful rep, right? Because it's everything you have, and they're pushing everything they have. But then they see that little tick mark, and that little dopamine hit it hits you because hey, I just got a little bit better. I'm trending. I'm better than I was. I'm now more. I'm an athlete now. I'm 21 miles an hour. I'm an athlete. I'm fast, right? So. I think when you say, hey, it's not necessarily easy, but you make it the best part of the day because you're tracking things, and they get chances where they can have all these wins. They
Mhm.
can have all these wins day after day after day, and it's like, well, shoot, I'm a winner. Look at all my wins today.
And motivation does not come from the words of coaches. Motivation comes from seeing progress.
Yeah,
Those wins are just the absolute most important thing. And you're talking about how it sounds. What your stuff reminded me of is that you're only performing a couple times a week because it's too taxing. And some people think we perform every day, and we do not. We maximum 3 times a week, 3 days a week, maximum in spikes. Because even though our dosage is really small, sprinting is probably the highest neurological CNS thing we can possibly do. I say that sprinting in a straight line as fast as you can and getting timed is the most extreme human movement. And you cannot repeat that day after day. I'll back up. You actually can if you're 5 or 6 years old. But once you get to be pretty damn good, I mean, like Noah Lyles, he doesn't go out and sprint 100 miles an hour 7 days a week.
Right.
I mean, it's like a couple times a week, and he's very careful with the dosage.
Gotcha. Um, that's two things I want to say. One about the tracking. Like, I'm I'm 50, and I told you was used to just lift a lot more, powerlifting and strongman, right? But now I'm doing this swim. So here's my book, right? It's just one of my journals I was using at the time before I finished my planner. And I was simply just tracking the number of days in a week I would swim on one side, and then how many little PRs I could have on the other side. And so it's at the point where I was getting like a PR every day. And it might be simply this, not that I swam longer, but maybe this time on this lap, it took me less strokes or my time was slightly better. And I think if you can game that, so what I did with my planner, which goes with the book, if you could game that on other things like, well, I know that to me optimizing my recovery, I need 110 ounces of water. Well, how many days in a row can I get 110? Well, it's new PR. I got 11 in a row, but before it was 10. Or maybe I forgot my creatine and my fish oil and my vitamin D. Well, now I tick that. I get the little tick mark in my book or in a planner, right? So now the kids can game all the other intangibles of being an athlete and have those little wins and stack that up. And now they're like, well, shoot, I'm ready for our 3 days a week of intense practice and spikes because I had all these other wins.
That is gamification. That is, I do the same thing. I keep a tally mark on how many glasses of water I drink every day.
Mm,
I
love
have
that.
run 1,009 consecutive days of at least a mile. And I wouldn't know that if didn't keep track of it. But every time I write that down, you get a little hit of, I did something
I did
good.
something. Yeah.
It was a win. It was a win. And I don't know if you remember back. I'm sure you do. I don't know. I'm a little older than you. But my introduction to the weight room came in bigger,
Bigger, faster,
faster, stronger,
stronger. Yeah.
and they did a beautiful, amazing thing, and that was they kept track of lifts, and there was you would repeat your week 1 lifts in week 5, and your week 2 got repeated in week 6,
Yep.
and in 4 weeks you get a little bit stronger.
Yeah.
And so kids were like breaking records every day. Even if you were the weakest guy in the weight room, you might break 4 records in one day.
Yep.
And
Do it all the time. I love that.
they measured, vertical jump, they measured horizontal jump, they did the dot drill time things, they timed 40s, and so much of I'm kind of known for a couple sayings, and one of them's record, rank, publish.
Yep.
And that's absolutely credit to bigger, faster, stronger. That most weight room people today make fun of that program, but they did a lot of things right.
Yeah. Right off Atomic Habits, we improve what we measure. And then we had Mickey Marotti on from Ohio State. I say this all the time. He says, if it's important to us, we measure it. And one of the examples is they have a different color chart of what urine could look like in terms of how dark or how light it is near the urinals, so that when you're going to the bathroom, hey, I'm hydrated, right? You can look at this little measurement on the chart. Well, it's really, really light lemonade. I'm good to go. So on those hot days in September when you're dehydrated, they have a measuring ability, right? So that measuring piece is huge. When I was actually deep into training strongman, I was at my heaviest, 320. And I had this awesome coach out of California. He's from Norway. His name is Ode, ODD, Ode Hagen. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
No.
Awesome dude. Super strong, lean, 6'5", 210, 400-pound axle bar grip with both hands, double overhand, like super huge grip strength. Anyways, he's training me on these strength sports. He goes, hey, 1 or 2 days a week for your main lift, it won't be a lift. You're gonna have to sprint a really short distance very, very hard. And I was like, whoa. And so what I found, even though I was heavy on a relative basis, I was still decently fast, really short distance because you're exerting all that force into the ground. But I had no idea that I was recruiting everything physically to move that short distance. And so sometimes I'm moving just my body weight in a short distance in a sprint to build my overall front or overall back squat. I was
I
like,
always
dang.
say that sprinting is the best potentiator of the weight room,
Hmm.
which simply means a potentiator is something that makes the next thing better. The old-fashioned word would be warm up, but as you know, warm up used to be take 2 laps, and that is not a potentiator of anything in the world, except for maybe body temperature. But if people would do, I have something called the atomic speed workout that takes 15 minutes. And a lot of people have replaced their warm up with my atomic speed workout. And what they have found is they move weights better
Yeah.
when they're properly warmed up. And the key thing in the atomic speed workout is 2 max speed short sprints.
Yep.
So I think you might. I was going to get to this at some point, but um, I do the atomic speed warm up 2 days a week um, on our two lower body days, and that is I've always kind of done because I'm a big fan of Zach Dakant at
Yep,
TCU,
he's
and
amazing.
I've done a lot of his stuff, and I have a lot of his material, and I've read a lot of his. I have all his stuff. All right, and I used to do a lot of what he does, and I've been using the atomic speed warm up for well, it's been since you spoke to PSM a couple months ago.
Yep,
I've been using that ever since. It's fantastic for getting athletes in a position, like you said, for getting in a position and ready to train in the weight room. And it's not necessarily, I don't necessarily use it for speed, even though it makes them
done right, it
faster.
will improve their speed too.
It makes them faster, but
Yep,
it also just gets them ready
yep.
specifically for lower body training. And I love that you brought that up because I was going to eventually get to that. And also getting to that, I need to ask you because I need help. I need to ask a question. How do you coach the prime times better? I struggle getting my kids to do them. One, I got kids that like to goof around, and that's part of
Yep.
strength and conditioning class. You're always going to have that. It's probably never going to go away. But I need to make it more efficient.
The cues I have is everything's in front of you.
Okay.
That we are straight legged, and some people call it straight legged bounding. But we just Chris Corfus called it prime times because Deion Sanders, if people were ever stupid enough to throw to his side of the field, he would intercept it in prime time and into the end zone. And so we have 3 different types of prime times. We do short, high frequency ones where maybe our feet are only going 12 to 18 inches, but it's still straight legged and it's still in front of us. And then we have the big primes that we race in. And that's why I say, hey, race, let's go. And
Yeah.
once again, straight legged, nothing behind you. If you can't do it correctly, slow down, but keep everything in front of you. And the reason why that's so important is it really lights up the glutes. It's a really, really good glute exercise. And then the third one is kind of a transfer thing where we violate one of the rules. Instead of a straight legged, we go bent legged primes. So a bent legged prime is still everything in front of you, nothing backside at all. As soon as your feet hit the ground, it's popping. Your feet are, but we are bent kneed at that point, which is much more similar to running and, or just to sprinting, I should say. And if you really think about it, the difference between sprinting and running is that sprinting is big in the front. It's front side. Big in the front, short in the back. That's one of my cues. Big in the front, short in the back. Whereas my distance guys, even my 2 4:15 milers, they are not big in the front. they're kind of equal in the front and back. Their legs are just swinging back and forth. But if you're going to put huge amounts of force into the ground, you have to lift your hammer. You have to really get big in the front. And that's why coaches have always get your knees up, stuff like that. But that's true. If your feet, like a distance runner, seldom gets their feet more than 4 or 5 inches off the ground because it's efficient. They also run with T-Rex arms, like their
Right.
arms are in front.
Yep.
Whereas a sprinter gets a stretch reflex of the shoulder because their hand goes way past their hips, and I can feel that stretch happen when I do that. And then they're also big in the front, short in the back, and they're really tall. And those are my only three cues in sprinting: get tall, big in the front, short in the back, and hands past the hips. And that's what sprinters do. And that's one of the problems with the way I was trained as a high school and college sprinter is we did so much endurance work that I was practicing short arms. I was practicing equal front and back. Probably I was probably running like I was 5'11" instead of 6'2", and sprinters are just different. And people have always been afraid to train sprinters differently. And I blame that all on the distance running craze of the last 50 years that I bought into hook, line, and sinker. I wish I was still sprinting instead of going out and running a mile or two or three every day. It's jogging, just a terrible habit of mine, and it just really detrains the qualities that you're trying to get in speed.
Man, so Bill Bowerman and you, different, right? Come,
Well, maybe. I've been running for 50 years. I run every damn day for the last 1,009 days.
but
So
he would run his whole track team distances.
he would, and that's why he never had very good sprinters. And don't look it up or anything. I'm just trying to be funny. But there is a Bowerman thing that you would love. And he said that he was really talking about Prefontaine, all the great distance runners he had. But he said that extreme results never come from moderate exercise.
Right,
I
intensity. Because
absolutely love that. Somebody sent me a cartoon the other day. Like a pitcher says, I'm going to throw the ball faster. They go, okay, you need to throw 2,000 pitches a day at 50 miles an hour.
nope.
And they're making fun of the guy who was a cross country coach. And no, you got to be
Right,
extreme to him. So what he believed is that you can't practice in third gear every day.
right.
You have to have performance level days followed by down days that sets up the next. It's almost like game, pregame, game, pregame. The pregame is not just to recover from the day before. It's
Mm,
also to set up the next big practice. So instead of running the same damn workout every damn day with the same damn pace, he would put guys in performance mode like every other day. And to
gotcha.
me, football teams, well, good football teams do that now. I just call it the high-low theory.
I had a technical question and a correlation, and I'm not sure how it actually translates. One of the coaches had mentioned this to me. Some states and schools no longer have the triple jump. Other states and schools do. And they were talking about the correlation between someone who's a really good triple jumper and playing like a team sport like football or lacrosse, etc. Can you
I know
talk to
exactly what you're
that?
talking about
Can you
too.
talk to that at all?
Absolutely. Iowa doesn't have a triple jump, but they're a weird freaking state anyway, though.
Neither
They
does
don't, they don't have a pole vault. And then they run like a hurdle shuttle as an actual event. And so anyway, yeah, and they also run instead of the 300 hurdles, they do a 400 hurdles, which is just cruel and unusual punishment. And so yeah, so there are states that don't have it. I actually I have a kid this year who went 48-1 indoors, and that's number one in Illinois. A kid named Trayson Bones. His dad played 8 years for the Chicago Bears. He's a stud, and the triple jump might there is like 5 to 7 times body weight that's coming down on one leg, and it can't collapse, and the foot has to hit with a directional force. So it is one of the best. I mean, you would seriously consider doing the triple jump with every athlete in a training way, because it is, I think, one of the most advanced things that you can do is land on one leg with several body weights and not collapse.
Right.
I mean, that stiffness is the most underrated strength that I know of. Usually we think of strength as pushing a lot of weight.
You have to
Well,
absorb force, though, too.
Absorbing force is, and I don't know if there's anything that we do in the weight room that absorbs force as much as like a triple jump.
Even depth jumps that are weighted still won't.
I think you're exactly right, and I think the speed component. And to your point, I'm really good friends with ever since the beginning of a thing called tracking football, where these former track coaches, football coaches got together and started assembling track stats for football coaches to guide them in the recruiting process or the draft process in the NFL. And so they have like 12 years of data now. And we know that speed is really, really important. That fast guys who can play, skillful, fast guys, or big guys that are fast, they're all over the NFL. But the most unusual thing they've learned is that football players that were great at the triple jump, long jump, and high jump are amazing football players. That those are really, really good athletic things. And by the way, I know that you cannot be a good high jumper, triple jumper, or long jumper without being fast too. But there is that strength and force absorption and force generation component that I think is so unique for those guys. And I think it's just like sprinting. Sprinting and jumping is hard to replicate in the weight room.
Yeah.
And because of that, people think I'm anti-weight room and stuff. I'm not at all.
Right.
But you need that
piece,
that force absorption component.
So if I'm training like a team and they're not on the track team, I could make an argument that, hey, we're going to spend some time getting better at triple jumping, and it's right, left, right, but other days it's going to be left, right, left. So you have the same volume. You're not just jumping off the same plant foot on the first jump each time.
And you're making the brain work.
Right, the neurological pathways get developed as well. So then you're stronger and also better at absorbing and applying force on both legs, and you're now more athletic in your team sport. Okay.
Yeah. And I think too,
Got it.
Somebody just told me the other day that they put their whole team on the 30-yard line and have them bound with one leg.
Yep.
And see how many bounds it takes to get into the end zone.
Yeah. Now they're measuring something, and it's a game. So
it's
now
a game, and it's you can't collapse.
Right.
And get there very fast. I mean, you have to hit with a springiness. You have to be strong. And so the triple jump is actually mind-wise very difficult. Like you're going to land on the same foot you jumped off of, and then land on the other foot, and then land on two. So it's kind of like an advanced hopscotch type thing. And so for some athletes, you really need to do a lot of single-legged bounding before you get to the triple jump.
Sure. I look like a drunk dinosaur, but that's a different story. All right. So, Tony, I know you want to watch the game tonight. So do we. Had a great time. Who do you got winning tonight?
Well, if Houston beats Florida, I win $550 in a.
All right.
It was $100 pool though. Okay.
Okay.
So I mean, I paid good money, and I'll get third.
Okay.
But I had my final four right. I had Houston over Florida, and there's no freaking way Houston should have won against Duke.
Right.
No way.
Right.
But, I mean, they're a team of destiny, and they have a great S&C guy at Houston. Alan Bishop. Well, not only Alan, but one of my best friends in the S&C business, Kurt Hester, is the football S&C guy there. And I just did a podcast with him that was published last week. But Kurt Hester and Alan Bishop at the same school is amazing. And the thing that I love about Alan, he's always publishing these beautiful pictures of food. And he says, eat like a man. And when people say, what's your view on nutrition? I'll be like, eat like a man. You know, how does a man eat? He doesn't eat Skittles.
Right?
He eats meat and like food, like real food, like a
Real
plate
food.
of lots of good food. And so he's really taught these kids that are like eating chips and candy all the time. He takes these kids and turns them into men.
Okay. Let's say you're lifting, or let's say you're on your, one of your runs. What do you listen to?
I listen to Red Dirt Country. I listen to singer-songwriters, John Prine, Bob Dylan, Neil Young,
Okay.
and recently folk punk. I don't know if you're into folk punk, but download some Frank Turner stuff. Now, also Laura Ann Grace. I know she's transsexual and stuff, which is kind of weird, but his and her music is both really good. So look those people up.
All right. What's a bucket list you and your wife trip you guys would like to take you haven't done yet?
We just got back from New York City, one of our favorite places in the world. Too expensive, but we love it. But we're actually going on a Viking cruise this summer.
I've seen those.
Alaska.
Okay.
Alaska Viking cruise.
Awesome. We were up in Alaska a couple years ago, and great fishing, great whale watching, great everything. It's just awesome.
Can't wait.
Favorite sports movie or two?
Field of Dreams.
Kevin
Um,
Costner.
yes. Something about. I just have so many memories of playing catch with my dad. It makes me tear up every time I watch it.
Do you like the Without Limits movie?
Yes,
Okay.
I love both of the Prefontaine movies.
Movies, right? There's two of them.
Yeah,
Yeah, gotcha. Um, is there a favorite sport you like to watch?
football.
Athlete?
It's
Oh,
so
sorry, go ahead.
sick. I grew up with basketball, and I'm not a huge basketball fan anymore. I'll watch the game tonight. I used to love the Chicago Cubs, and I don't think I watched more than one inning of a baseball game last summer. I'm just not interested anymore. But I'll watch every college and pro football game. I cannot ever
Good
not
enough.
watch.
How about favorite athlete to watch? Any sport, young or old, alive or not?
Uh, Probably Patrick Mahomes. Uh,
Wow.
I feel kind of attached to him because Bobby Stroop is his trainer, and Bobby has spoken for us 3 times at our track football consortium that we have every year in December. And so I feel like through him, I've never met Patrick, but through him, I feel like I have an inside to his training. And the other guy is probably McCaffrey, because same thing. I've never met, probably will never meet Christian, but I'm such good friends with Brian Kula that I feel like I know Christian through him.
Gotcha. I know you said you like one of your recommendations is read 1,000 books. Do you have one or two or a few that you would recommend?
Well, one of my best friends, Steve Jones, wrote a book called The Twin Thieves, the best book on leadership I've ever read. The Twin Thieves are the fear of judgment and the fear of failure, and I think we all suffer from that. And he just writes it in such a great way. I love the book Essentialism. I love the book by Mark Manson, The Subtle Art of Not Giving Enough.
Right.
Uh, but there's only 2 books I've read twice, and that was Pillars of the Earth, a book by Ken Follett about the building of medieval cathedrals, which sounds weird, but it was just awesome. And the other book was The Stand by Stephen King.
You read
Probably,
that, the whole thing?
excuse me?
You read that story, The Stand?
Oh, twice.
Oh man, that's that old lady versus that other guy, right?
Well, at the end, yes, for
Uh,
sure. But yeah,
There's
The Stand is, and I'm not a huge Stephen King fan, but man, The Stand in 11/22/63, the fictional story about time travel and preventing Kennedy's assassination.
assassination.
I just love that, and yeah. So
Okay, and the one that you said the pillars of what? About
Pillars of the
cathedrals
Earth.
of the earth.
It's one of the
My
it's one
wife's
of the
gonna like
highest
that one.
rated books of all times. It's really interesting.
Are you an Ayn Rand fan?
No,
No, don't like her. Don't.
no, she's not a Bernie Sanders socialist. So did that
No.
surprise you? Does it surprise you that I've spoke at Bernie Sanders rallies?
No, I didn't know your personality or political views at all. Zero.
Oh, cool.
Zero.
Yeah, no, I feel safe by saying I'm a Bernie Sanders fan because he has no chance of ever being president. So, people just dismiss me.
Oh, all right then. The next question could be fictional or non-fictional. Favorite hero or villain, or and villain? They could be different people.
Oh, um, I'm just people. I got asked that at a clinic recently, and I'm just not a villain and hero fan. Like somebody said, you should say the Flash because he's like the speed guy or something. But I don't even know if he's a hero or a villain. So, no, I
That's
could do
okay.
something easy like the Batman or something, or but no, I'm just not that guy.
I would say maybe I don't know you, but people could say that their your dad kind of shaped you as a coach. People would say he was a hero a lot in my life,
Well, yeah,
but then also he was a villain. Some nights I hated him.
yeah, absolutely. When you talk about most impactful, I have an uncle that was a great football coach. He was the best man at my wedding, and yeah, Kelly Kane and Don Holler were absolutely. I was kind of thinking about superheroes when
Sure.
you asked that question, but
Yeah.
yeah, there's my wife's a hero to me, my kids, all that stuff.
All right. Now people say you don't like lifting, but you said you like lifting. It has its place. What is your favorite lift for you?
For me, it's just pushes and pulls.
Okay.
Because I run so much, my legs don't feel as good running the next day after a leg workout, and I want to run every day.
Yeah.
And but for athletes, my favorite's probably deadlift.
Okay. And then do you have a quote?
Oh, I have lots of quotes, but I'm trying to think one that would be a go-to. Um, I would say never let today ruin tomorrow.
Beautiful. Beautiful. There's a lot of different ways people can reach out, find you, connect with you, different sites. Let everyone know where can people find you.
Well, I think you found my phone number by just Googling
That's true.
what
You
what what
can,
is Tony Holler's phone number,
that
and
is absolutely true.
I am I'm kind of accessible, like I put myself out there. So yeah, if you type in "feed the cats" or Tony Holler or and I run my own my own Twitter site, PN Track,
Yep.
and Twitter really changed my life because it gave me free reach, as I said earlier. But I have my son that does not coach is my content manager, and that's all he does is YouTube stuff. So my YouTube, Insta, Threads, uh, TikTok, all that stuff is he. I'm sending him information, and he's putting it out there.
One thing of the things I'll point out that CoachTube is an option where people can get a hold of you and some content. And there's other legit coaches on there as well with other resources, courses, things like
Yes,
that too. So,
I have 17 courses on CoachTube, and it's interesting when when the CEO contacted me 4 years ago, he said we think that you could be the next Hal Mummy, and I had just gotten done reading The Perfect Pass, which is the greatest football book of all times about Hal Mummy, and so he was just a hero of mine. I'm like, yeah, right. I'm going to be like the next air raid guy, right? And they go, no, he's made 100,000 in the last year. And so anyway, long story short, I'm the number 2 seller all time on CoachTube now,
okay,
and he's number 1.
I take it, right?
Yep, it's been great to me.
I'll probably follow up with you because I have a digital course as well. So, um,
And I was going to tell you, Jim, CoachTube. I mean, I've had stuff sold on other sites. If somebody buys from your link on
mhm,
CoachTube, you
yep,
get 97%.
boom.
Unheard of.
I'm gonna
If
look
they
at
sell it for you, you get 70%.
right.
It is, I mean, I have stuff on Championship Productions, and yeah, it's like 10%. I get 10% of anything they sell. So yeah, you just get pennies.
Gotcha. Okay, Coach Jim it is. Um, man, so Tony, again, thanks for being on the show. For those that reach out to us, want to get a hold of Tony or they got follow-up questions, info at athlete-builder.com. Shout out Tony, shout out Lucas, shout out Jocko Fuel. I like to rehydrate. and use it all the time. But again, Tony, thanks for being on the show. Hang on here for a few minutes after we hang up here, but it was really great having you on. Thank you for the gift today.
Oh, I had fun. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Tony.